Think any of us will look back in our lives and regret the things we didn't buy?
Deep breath. Am I ready? That's the real question. Um, okay, so today we finish Lord's Prayer. We finish this part of Lord's Prayer, and of course, learning goes on. Today we're going to get kind of two parts, mainly kind of the rescue from danger and evil, the last of the petitions there toward the end for us, and then the final part is a doxology. And we may not give that justice, but that's where we are, where we be here. So today will be the end. Next week we'll have the meal and celebration for Julie, that milestone. And then after that, we're going to have fellowship time and discussion for the next 6 weeks after, and you'll see more about that next time as we begin this thing on vitality and what it means to be, as Don Marie's showing her muscles over there, what does it mean to be a vital congregation? We'll be doing a sermon series. Worship will be geared around that, and then we're going to go over to Albritton and just kind of discuss each one of those 7 marks. Maybe the first one we'll do 2. That would be a way to do it. All right. So this one, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. This is the hardest part for me in many ways, because we're dealing with evil. Prayer, for me, sometimes is kind of this cry for help. And it's a whole lot of other things too. But this particular part, to me, is, when I was thinking about it, it's just kind of this cry for help. And right now, that part speaks pretty loud to me with all that's going on in the world. Prayer, as we've been talking somewhat about it through using the Lord's Prayer, it's not just asking for this handout, but it's being aware of what's going on in our life and in a broader context and saying, God, I give this to you. And especially when we start talking about evil, I know I cry out for help with how in the world do we deal with this? And so, you think of all that's going on right now. And I know when I was younger, I had a hard time thinking there was evil in the world. I don't know, is anybody else like that? But the older I get, I don't think I'm getting jaded, but I'm aware there are some things that they just ain't right. And even more powerfully, there's evil. There's evil out there. So we're going to explore that. And I know I tiptoe with this, but so I'll just put that out there. I'm still coming to terms with what that looks like. Luke's version of the Lord's Prayer ends with, do not bring us to a time of trial. It doesn't have what Matthew has. I need a handout. Who has all the handouts? K. Extras. You stole them all. We're expecting a crowd. Hey, we got a crowd. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A 90-member church, and we have a 10th here. I'll take it. I have to remember that. That's pretty darn good. Yeah. When you compare Luke and Matthew, Matthew adds this new part, deliver us from the evil one, or at your first worksheet there or handout, here's different versions that I put. End Times Roman. Sorry, Dumry. Okay, thank you. She gets after me because I put things sometimes in Times Roman and they're more current fonts. Anyway, here's different ways of saying it that different Bible people who have written Bible have translated. Keep us safe from the evil one. Deliver us from the evil one. Rescue us from the evil one. Save us from the evil one. We say, deliver us from evil. So we're going to get to that. What's the difference from evil and the evil one? But it's interesting that Luke doesn't have that, but Matthew does. So let's look at temptation, and then we'll look at evil. I think there's when you think of temptation, what do you think of? Get ready with the mic, Adrian. You're on. When you think of temptation, what's temptation? Lead us not to temptation. What in the world is temptation?
To try it.
Okay.
That's loud.
What was that? I couldn't hear. I'm kidding. What else? Temptation. When you think of temptation.
Have a chocolate cake and you're on a diet.
That's temptation. Chocolate cake and you're on a diet.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Anything else? When you say that prayer, what is it are you keeping it at that chocolate cake? We'll get Joyce first.
Well, I think it's wanting to do something that you know is not right, but you're still thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. So when we go through, and you don't have to answer this, when we have I'll speak for myself. When we're praying that, it becomes rote. I'm glad other heads are nodding. But what if next Sunday you take the bulletin and I think it would take some ahead of time work to contemplate, when I get there later in the service, what does this mean for me? Don't say it out loud, but to pause with that. Be specific so that when we come to that prayer, what does that mean for you? So somebody smarter than me said, if we too narrowly define temptation as an enticement to perverse or unethical behavior, we set a low bar for the meaning of virtue by simply steering clear of the worst offenses. So if we keep it at chocolate cake, it might be a serious thing for me. A lot of times we can joke about it. I hope you don't mind me saying this. We can joke about it, the chocolate cake kind of thing, or don't let me yell at somebody who ticks me off while we're driving. While that's all true, what this guy is saying is sometimes we just keep it at that level or a low bar, as he said, rather than looking at it a deeper way of how do we align with Christ? and to think about what does that look like for me, for you? What does it look like to align with Christ and what Christ would want us to be and act in certain ways? Now, what are the obstacles to getting there? And often for me, it's going to be deeper than the chocolate cake. Although that's an issue for me when maybe I overeat. Not maybe, so there's a deeper behavior there that maybe I need to be working on so that I can be my best for Christ. Does that make any sense? So there's one level of don't go do this bad thing. Don't yell at the driver, which is true. I don't want to. Deeper than that, or underneath all that, or above, or foundational, whatever, however you want to look at it, is this, I think, an opportunity to look deeper and say, what are the ways that I want to align with Christ? Where are the places that I need to work on that? Lord, lead me not into temptation. Get rid of those things. Help me put those things aside so that I can align with Christ. So but doing that means not just rotely saying the Lord's Prayer, which I do every time, and I'm trying not to. Yeah, Jean. Adrian.
So are you talking about the kind of temptation when someone in your neighborhood is repeating something that gossip, and instead of listening to it, you join in?
Right. To me, that would be.
That's a big temptation.
It's a huge.
But to learn to turn the other ear and
walk away, or perhaps at a certain point.
say something positive.
Yeah. Or I have this friend, a colleague, a pastor, pretty nearby, and this is online. And there is another pastor who is challenging us. We just have very different styles. And I thought I was processing that other style and struggling a little bit. And with the first pastor, and he cut me off. It was beautiful. He cut me off and says, I don't want to talk about him. And here I was just processing, in my mind, just processing. No, he cut me off, and we didn't talk about it, but I have thought about it a bunch. He cut me off what was starting to edge up on gossip, or where this other person couldn't be part of the conversation. And I learned so much about that in that moment. It's like, how can I do that with others I won't use examples. But yeah, so not only walking away did he walk away from me, he didn't do that. He took even the more bolder step because he loves me and he trusts me and he wants the best for me, and I know that. And I was able to receive that because I love and trust him. And I thought, Terry Jo, that's the next step for your own growth is being aware of when that starts happening, because we're human and we do that. Doggone it. But I don't want to be that way. I want to align with how Christ would handle that. And so what does it mean to not only engage in that, but sometimes in a loving way, point that out for others? What Mike did for me that day was another step in my journey of growth and awareness of that temptation of mine. I don't know. And Larry.
I think from the beginning, when we all started coming to church, catechism or whatever and so on, we learned to pray from memory the Lord's Prayer. And you may have said it, I don't know that I particularly think of each phrase when I'm praying. We pray it, and it's over within about a minute, and that's it.
Right.
But I had a friend of mine years and years ago that talk about it's not, well, it is spiritual in a way, but I started to complain about somebody and criticize somebody, and he said, I want to talk about it. He said, I don't want to talk about somebody else.
Yeah.
He says, let's just leave it. And you know, I've taken that to heart for the most part the rest of my life, and that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So whatever works, you know, take advantage of it.
Yeah. Similar story. And so, what are those things in you? First of all, it takes being open to think about where we're not aligned with Christ, and how can you name those things and work on them. That's been one I've been trying to work on ever since. That was a good learning thing, and I still cross that line, but yeah. I think for us to think about what is God calling us to be? What is God calling us to be? And to me, this is huge. How do we be open to growing, which means in part addressing those things that are temptations beyond the easy answers, but looking at a deeper or deeper behavior, what's undergirding that? Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah. So lead us not to temptation, in part is how do we say yes to God and what God wants us to be and do? So when you think about it, what distracts you, or what are the obstacles? I'm going to get away from the word temptation for a second. What are the obstacles for you or you see in other people's lives without pointing to that person? What are the obstacles that get in the way of being who God's called you to be? What's that?
Ego?
Our ego?
Our ego.
Yeah. How so?
Well, we just sometimes think we're better than somebody else, unfortunately.
And more times than not, I think for me, it's like I really don't think I'm better than anybody else, but then I start saying, ooh, here it is popping up here where I want my ID to go through or something. And it's like, well, in that way, there it is popping up. Yeah, I've got an ego that sometimes does that. Yeah, Kay.
Sometimes I think my obstacle is I'm tired of all of it that's coming at us. And I'm like, I can sit here in my chair and read my book, or I can deal more positively with people I live with that I need to, and I pray to love more deeply and react in a different way instead of watch the Rays game while they're talking, and
Yeah.
because you just don't know what to do sometimes. But it's real to me that you do get tired, and you'd like to just say, oh, well, I'm going to read this, and I'm not going to deal with it. And that's kind of a little thing, really, but it's real.
Very real. I know I was tired this week, really tired, and I snapped at a couple people. And it's like, I got to go back. And I think that's a real thing, is when we get tired or we get this or we get that, it impacts us to name it and be aware of it and take care of that while still then how do we be there for the people that we love and care about, even if they're difficult people?
But you deserve a break, too.
And that's, yeah, and you too, all of us. And so so the question then becomes, we can go down this rabbit trail of self-care, and self-care is an important step so we can be aligned with Christ. If I'm not taking care of myself, if I don't have enough rest, then I'm going to start snapping. And so I better do that because I don't want to snap, because that's not a Christ-like behavior, not just in the shallow way, but I want to serve, and I do want to, but that will get in my way. So I better do it. You too. Yeah. Anybody else willing to share?
I think for me, it's kind of along the similar lines. It's sort of the sense of feeling overwhelmed. Just overwhelmed with everything, whether it be stress or frustration or despair, or even just anything that makes me feel overwhelmed. I sort of lose focus and forget. And sometimes I have to stop and just think, okay, take a breath, and just, because you don't think about the things that you might do when you're rash about things. I had an example recently was I got an email from somebody that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and instinctively I wanted to respond to them right away because I was feeling hurt and I wanted to express that. And I said, you know what, let me just stop, take a breath. And I waited about 6 hours. I finally responded, and I just very calmly said what I needed to say. But I think that that's the more important thing, is stopping and taking a breath and remembering what we need to do. And like you said, self-care, I think it all starts with us. If we don't help ourselves, how do we help those around us?
Yeah.
And we have to be the example.
For sure.
So.
Think overwhelmed. When you're overwhelmed, think how that impacts so much. Yeah. So temptation, we have those things, those real tangible things. I keep trying to get off Diet Coke. I don't know that I'm going to. There's that tangible thing that tempts me every time. That's important for my health and well-being. But not to, when we get to that part of the prayer, what's underneath that, and what's the deeper things too, besides just the physical stuff, that I want to be a healthy disciple so I can serve better. So that Diet Coke, just trying to think of something. It's not about the Diet Coke. It is about the Diet Coke, but it's not. It's that I want to be healthy. So what have I got to do it? I want to drive down the road and not blow up at somebody in case they know where I'm pulling in. But the deeper thing is, how do I help that person have a better day, even if they tick me off? And it may mean that I need to talk to them if they bump into me. I don't know. Anyway, temptation. Can you pass that to Ann?
As we've spoken this morning, it sounds like all of these things are forgetting about God. When you ask what comes into our mind when we say the Lord's Prayer, that's the one that keeps on coming up for me, is forgetting about God and who God wants us to be, or trying to be disciples in the way that He has shown us to be. Whether it's Diet Coke, whether it's the traffic accident, whether it's gossip or any of those things, is that momentary forgetfulness of the choice.
Yeah. All right, I need somebody with Psalm 71:4. Who can do this one?
I'll start. I've got the mic.
Okay, hold it just a second. Who can be ready with 79:11? Tell you what, why don't we go to Joy? Are you willing to read that one out loud? And then we'll get the mic to Adrian. Can you do 142:5 through the first part of 6? Larry, could you do 144:7 and 8? All right, Ann.
Rescue me, O my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of the unjust and the cruel.
And 79:11, let the groans of the prisoners come before you. According to your great power, preserve those doomed to die.
Psalm 142, 5 and 6. I cry to you, O Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low.
And Psalm 144, verses 7 and 8. Stretch out your hand from on high. Set me free and rescue me from the mighty waters, from the hand of aliens, whose mouths speak lies and whose right hands are false.
Those are all cries for help in one way or another, and clear back then, here they are written, and here today we could do our modern day psalm of our own cries for help. God, be with us in this, both our temptations and then also, we'll say, the evil, to deliver us from evil. So in this part of our prayer, I tend to think of it as a cry for God's help. Some things are beyond my control. And so I cry out to God. And so when you come to that prayer next week, just pause and let that be your cry for whatever you need, and I'm going to challenge myself to not just rotely say that part of the prayer, but underneath I have done the prep work and I know what I'm praying for in that. And we prayed together too. All right, evil, the harder, at least for me. What do you think of when you think of evil? Is there evil in our world? That was unanimous. Am I the only one when I was younger? Anybody else when you were younger just have more of a goody two-shoe kind of attitude? Maybe I'm just the one. Everybody's good. That's the way I did. Yeah. What do you think of? Deliver us from evil. What comes to mind with that part of the prayer? Any bad thoughts or actions? You ever pause with that? Deliver us from evil. Or we'll pause right now. If you had to put 3, we'll just say 2 fill in the blanks, what would they be today? Deliver us. Okay. Yeah. What would be the 2 blanks, or just one? Deliver us from evil today. What would that be in that blank? Putin? Yeah. There's the one word right there. Yeah.
Putin, the Russian guy. Anybody?
Let's name it.
When I think of evil, I think of an intent to do harm. Not necessarily physical harm. Could be mental harm, but just an intent to hurt somebody or in some way or another.
Different from if I hurt you unintentionally and yet somebody brings all this horrible stuff to you intentionally. Yeah.
Right.
Well, if something comes to mind, I think there's something healthy in naming it. Maybe you want to after, but when it comes to evil in the New Testament, there's a couple things going on. In the New Testament, talking about evil is this, often it's the spiritual realm of something beyond our humankind self. And often it'll talk about spiritual forces of evil. It'll allude to that. And there's that one thing there. But there also, when it comes to evil, there's systems of evil. So there's, we think of rulers, and we could think of a cult, Adrian said, but also what are the systems in place where power is not shared in a healthy way? I think of, there are some things I think we have the best, I'll go on record saying this. I think we have the best justice system in the country, in the world. There are some things in our justice system that, in my opinion, need to be changed. Now, could that have an element of evil? In some cases, I think there is. I don't think it's all intently meant to harm people, but there are some things to me where I think we need to address.
I don't want to get political, but there are things in our government that we just are just ongoing that, to me, are abominable, and things that need to be changed.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah. It's hard not to get political, isn't it? You think of corruption, and you think it's easy for me to think of drug trafficking or human trafficking, abuse, child abuse. To me, those are complex. I don't want to use the word easy to think of because it's horrible. But those kind of things. But there are sometimes rulers who I cannot help but think with joy about what's happening in Ukraine. And I think we all have countries have different ways of seeing the world and ways things are going to be. But when I see what's going on in Ukraine, he's not just anybody. Yeah, that's what it is to me. Yeah, and to me that is evil, and I'm with Joyce on what I think about Putin. Yeah, and so evil, it's out there. You can tell I struggle with this. I'm still not, I don't have clarity around this. Maybe you all are better with that than me. I don't want evil. Yeah.
I go back to the Second World War, the genocide that was happening with the Jews. And the word genocide has been used here in this situation with Ukraine. I mean, 60, 70 years later.
Right. Pass that back to Kay.
This was a while back, but I remember, everyone will remember Carly Brusha and the way she was murdered and down the street from where we live. And I remember at the time, some words were said that the face of evil has probably passed by our house on Proctor Road to do the worst things that I could ever imagine. And I still think about that day. And that was evil.
That was evil. So when you come to that in the prayer, I'll put it on me. I gloss right over it. I know that by heart. It's usually when I transition to something. Okay, what's coming up? We're going to wind up the service. So I've been trying to challenge myself through this last however many weeks. How do I pause with each part? Often before, like I said. How do I not gloss over evil? I don't want to gloss over that part and just say it by rote. I want to be praying that, God, take hold of these things that I can't seem to do anything about. Deliver me from temptation and evil. Don't gloss over it, Terry Jo. Yeah, and so that's maybe a challenge for all of us. Oh, there's a lot more. I'm aware of time. I think I'm going to shift. There's so much there. What does it mean for God to lead us? That's one that jumps out. What does it mean for God to lead us through that? How do you get God to do that? God's ready to do that. And it's putting that out there and working with God. One last thing on that, then we'll close up with the last part. Gospel promises that evil will not have the last word, and that's what I hold on to. Or when you think about Revelation, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was so scared to read the book of Revelation. And I was like, oh, these codes and all that. And finally somebody said, here's how to summarize it. God wins. 2 words. Or God's love wins. And when I think about all the bad stuff out there, when I think about how the ways I get overwhelmed or tired and like, how am I going to be a better person? How can I be more Christ-like when I keep blowing it, And how's this world going to change with all this evil? Hold on to the Easter promises, to hold on to what the gospel promises, that evil won't have the last word and God's love wins. So I can be part of working toward that. So there's a whole lot more in just that one phrase, but there's an overthink. So we're going to close with the last part. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Woo! We just talked about evil, and then it comes to this. Thank goodness. Kind of reminds you of the beginning of the prayer, right? Talking about kingdom and stuff, and talking about how God is hallowed be thy name. It's going back. There's bookends to this prayer, and a doxology. We sing the doxology every Sunday, just about. What is a doxology? It's a praise to God. Essentially, that's what it means. How do we praise? A doxology is a praise to God. So the Lord's Prayer ends with a doxology, which is awesome. For thine is the kingdom and the power and glory forever. Think about how that connects with the rest of the prayer. Here's all this stuff that we need and all this, and I don't know, things are pretty tough. But we begin and we end our lives in praise to God. Not just our prayer, but we have the opportunity at least to begin and end our lives in praise to God, who's going to help us in the middle with all this other stuff in our lives. And maybe that's something to work toward from beginning when we hit the floor. Well, hopefully put our feet on the floor. When we start our day, how do I structure my life like the Lord's Prayer, where I'm going to put my feet down? I know all that's coming up that day. Maybe I'm anticipating a harder day than some. Maybe the world and the news comes on and it's going to be tough, but how do I put my feet down on the floor and start my day instead of with Wordle or Quirtle or Octordle? How do I start with praise to God? And then through the day, be praying different parts and maybe different words, but similar to the Lord's Prayer. Lead me not into temptation, or when I'm having a hard time, to pray that part. And then at night, when I'm closing my eyes, how do I say thank you, God, at the end? Beginning to end, bookended, in praise to God. Hopefully, beginning to end of our lives, praise to God. There's a cool rhythm to that, I think, with all this other stuff that goes on because we're human and because we live in a very human world. Lift that up to God. Praise, praise. So, there we go. In essence, the Lord's Prayer. Any last thoughts before we? I'm going to close in prayer if I can get this on really quick. hopefully. But, yeah, just a second. Let me get it going.
iPhone. Connected to iPhone.
Come on, baby. Metropolitan Boys Choir. I love boys choirs. Charlie will be singing that in 2 weeks, his last Sunday here. So that'll be nice. Go in peace. Thank you all.